Welcome to 2022. Welcome into the Post 90 podcast, and welcome to our guest, Michael Allen, who's the host of Blue City Radio, a writer for Post America, and also, one of the day one NYCFC fans that we often like to bring onto the show.
And day one Post 90
guest
guys.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of the OGs.
Yeah.
It's great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
I think probably, obviously the elephant in the room is who would have ever thought that we would be sitting here, talking about NYCFC winning an MLS Cup.
Absolutely. It's so amazing, isn't it? I mean, I'm still thinking about that day and getting chills when I think about it. It's amazing. Just truly, when we last talked, who'd have thought we'd have this conversation now in January?
No, I would assume our two past conversations are going to be very different than this one, because it's the vibe of the team is completely different with, finally having a trophy. And I think, one thing that we wanted to talk about was sort of, what was your experience with watching that game? When we score the goal to go ahead, and then ultimately, I think it was Mora scored the equalizer against us in literally probably the last second of the game. What were the emotions like for you?
Oh, man, it was so up and down. I remember when we scored, I was like, we're going to do this. We're actually going to do this. And then when it got to 90 minutes, I was like, we are going to do this. This is amazing. And then when that goal happened, I have to say I had everything about me, because of past experiences, was like, we're going to lose this. This is going to be the ultimate heartbreak, the ultimate playoff downfall, that we're just going to top ourselves in every other sort of heartbreak we had in the playoffs. But then when we rallied and came back and pulled it through, so proud of the team. So proud of how they came through that overtime section where they looked a little shell shocked. They got through it and got to penalties, and I mean, when Maxi hit the penalty, I was like, yeah, this is it. We're done.
Well, that reminds me of not necessarily the final, but we were there for the Revs game that also went to penalties, and there was a guy, I'll never forget him, I don't know his name, who's in the supporter section with us, and he's looking at Maxi step up for a penalty, and he's like, oh no, why?
He goes, not this guy.
Not this guy. And then he drills it. Maxi drills it, and the guy goes, I'm sorry, Maxi. And that's just kind of how I think everyone who loves NYCFC felt in that moment. I'm so sorry for doubting you.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Maxi's really come on with the penalties the past couple times. He's come through, so I guess we can't really fault him anymore.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, when that Mora goal goes in, I think I literally collapse and sit on the floor. The living room of everyone watching goes quiet, and you're just thinking about the penalties with Orlando. You're thinking about even the Revs game where they scored in the dying seconds against us too, to even force penalties. Unfortunately, you have to think about Mott's too at Citi Field. It's like, oh no, this cannot be happening again. And there's moments like the Revs game where we pulled through, but then you have the Orlando and the Mott's penalty to be like, this could really easily be taken away immediately. And I think we go into extra time and we looked kind of flat off the rip. I think a lot of people that were at the stadium said that is the loudest that they've ever heard any sporting event in history, and I can only imagine, because it's similar probably to what we experienced when the Revs scored at Gillette. And I think that sort of sucked the energy out of some of our players on the field, obviously, and rightfully so, because, how do you deal with that? You see somebody like Chanot absolutely losing his mind. I think that we've discussed in our previous episode, rightfully so. It was just an insane moment.
Yeah. Well, I think one other thing is, looking back at it now, is in that moment it was such dread and of course Portland's going to do it. They've been here before. Of course they're going to score in the last minute and then, beat us in overtime to win it. That's their franchise. That's what they've done. They've won this trophy in the past. But just, that was kind of the energy going in. And then, there was that spark that somehow led to us lifting the cup. And I think looking back at it now, I wouldn't have it any other way, just because, it makes the story that much better. But in the moment, we were debating, do we turn this off? Can we quit now?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I threw my hat across the room. I had to find it later on. It was pretty upsetting, but it speaks to the chemistry of this team this year too. Just in looking back, it just Ronnie Dallas put together a team that believes in each other. They fight for each other. Keep going back to that James Sands quote. Watch how we fight for each other. That thing that he had post game. I think it was post the Atlanta game, maybe that he quoted that. That he just said, "Watch how we fight for each other. Watch how this team fights for each other," and that's what they did, and they came through it, and that's really special to find. And we haven't necessarily had that in past iterations of this team. So, yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. It was such a special game, such a special day, and it was great to. I was out actually in New Jersey doing a show when that game happened. I was driving back into New York that night and seeing all the buildings in the city lit up blue was just the most beautiful sight in the world. It was great.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Well,
it's
wasn't it the mayor? It was some important New York human basically stated that this is the only soccer club in New York, and I
Oh,
think that was the biggest. I think
yeah
that was the biggest statement that I heard out of everything.
at the parade afterwards. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they also said it at New Year's Eve, the New Year's Eve celebration too, when they had the cup. The guy was like the only
Yeah.
soccer club in New York, which is just technically correct. I mean, it's true.
It's
I
correct.
yeah.
And I
would
think
say it's
if
correct.
the Giants and I think the Jets are getting sued by New York possibly over being called New York whatever, but being in New Jersey.
Oh really?
I think the Red Bull should definitely be thrown in there. I'm
Yeah,
not
absolutely. They got to be a little nervous with that lawsuit. I agree.
right.
But I think you bringing up that quote about James Sands. It is a moment, that moment, it means a lot to see where the chemistry of the team is. And then when you see somebody like Sands depart the club, who I think a lot of people would argue, I think, he got that Young Player of the Year award. And aside from Taty, he's up there, number one or number two for, probably most valuable player on the team. You start to wonder what this team will actually look like in 2022, especially because you see some pretty key departures, in Goody, which I think is maybe the craziest of them all. On Blue City Radio, you guys had Joe Tollison, and he talked about how, Ronnie starts Malt for the first 3 games of the playoff run. And then all of a sudden, something that you probably rarely see really in any sporting event in the finals, he makes a lineup change just to make it, essentially, because he had the thought that it would be better, and he does start Goody. And to see him put that amount of trust and belief in, what Goody can bring to this team, to see the club not renew the contract was, I think, a little weird.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure what's happening there because he was talk about a player that we last year at this time. If we're talking about Goody, we were all sort of like, what's he going to be this year? But he proved to be sort of like a fulcrum of the team. Certainly, like that goal he scored in Atlanta was the spark that led the winning streak, and arguably, I think, led us into the cup. And he scored. He was the assist leader in Taty goals too. Like he kept feeding him in there and getting in. I think he did have the assist in the Portland game. So he's a big loss. I agree. He's a big loss. There's going to be some things we have to reconcile. I think Malta can step up. I think he's a good player, but he certainly has shown that he's susceptible to some things up and down in part of games. And Goody was steady and good, and he had a great free kick and could get those balls into the box. And we're going to miss that. So it's one of the questions I have about how we're going to replace those guys.
Do you get the feeling that he is gone and that there's not, something going on working in the background for a contract? Because out of every, major name that departed, with Medina, with Rocha, with Izzy, and then with Goody, he's the only of the 4 where there hasn't been any kind of conversation around what his future plans are.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard is that he may be going back to the league that we got him from. But that's just been a loose rumor kind of thing. So I'm hoping that there's some discussions with him. I think it's, we just didn't renew his option. We didn't that was the only thing. So there's a renegotiation possibility there. But I haven't heard anything about whether he's actually actively engaging with the team in negotiations or whatnot. I think they're seeing what the market is out there for him, and he's going to make choices from that. I know he's not on the roster in the preseason, so that's a big indicator of where he's going. I think he's gone. Unless I hear otherwise.
Yeah.
Probably back home
Mm-hmm.
for him.
Yeah, you see a lot of players that like to make those moves, like Valeri, who unfortunately, we've been reminded this week, NYCFC fans have done their job on Twitter. MLS throws up that what is your favorite Valeri moment, and everybody gets Sean saving his penalty, and it's like that was his last kick for the Timbers, and we tweeted out how like the only MLS jersey that we have in this house that is not an NYCFC one is Valeri's. I have a Valeri jersey from, I think back before NYCFC was even a thought, or at least a thought in our minds. So it's definitely somebody to respect, but it's funny. We're kind of taking our shots on Twitter now, the way that everybody else has throughout our playoff run.
Yeah, Valeri's he's a special player, really great player, and the league's going to be worse off for him not being in it. So that's all we can say. But I did enjoy those tweets as well. That's definitely my favorite Valeri moment right now too.
Well, I think my first ever MLS experience was Valeri scoring a ridiculous goal. I think possibly in the Cup final from years and years ago, maybe 2013, 2014.
I think that is what would have in that made me buy the jersey, actually.
It was, I just loosely, I popped it on TV and I was like, I was bored, just like, hey, let me give MLS a shot. And Valeri scored, the most ridiculous goal I've seen maybe on TV, and that was one of my first. So respect, but also I think it's nice to have that full circle of the team that I love putting them down. I think that's a good full circle to have.
Well, now we've taken a couple bodies, who was it that the manager that got fired the day after they beat us, actually, which I guess we get an assist for that, but I think was it Chicago? Maybe we took their manager after they beat us, and then Valeri. So we're starting to build a list here of
body bags.
Yeah, of people we've put down. But yeah, I think, Goody is a big departure. And then, probably the biggest topic of this entire offseason is like, what is going on with Taty? Like, it's literally inescapable every single day. You hear rumors. The list of clubs that we've heard, he could potentially be going to gets longer every day, from West Ham to, I've heard, Arsenal. Everton was thrown in there at some point. Palmeiras has been begging us for Taty for 2 years. It's always like, what is going to happen with him?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting situation with him. And quite honestly, I thought he was going to be gone by now. But the more the time goes on, I think that we might actually have him until the summer. It seems like to be easier to move players then. And we don't seem to be in any hurry to get rid of him. Like, we definitely have a set price on him. I think he's worth $15 million, which he should be. He is. He's worth more than DK. He's a Golden Boot winner, So DK sort of set the bar with that as far as like his transfer fee. So I think that we got to have an offer like that to match it. I think the latest offer from West Ham was like 8.5, and we're not going to sell him for that. So they got to up their game if they want him, and I think we're content to keep him until the summer. And I think he is happy playing here. I don't think he's going to Palmeiras. That's just the one thing I don't think he's going to do. I think his eyes are on Europe, and I think he's going to go to a top 5 league over there if he makes the move. And I think that's what we're holding out for, and it's just going to be a special thing. I think we'll have him until the summer, but I think we are going to lose him in the summer for sure. But maybe that'll get us through that Champions League run, that's all I really want from Taty in this place.
Yeah, I think that really is the only thing that he hasn't accomplished. We kind of had that talk of, if he was to stay, what would it be for? Maybe an MVP in the MLS, which is, he knows himself is hard to capture because he did just about everything but score an extra goal maybe or an assist to win that award.
Yep.
And I definitely think he's well above the level of Palmeiras. I think we can all agree. No disrespect to the club, but he does belong in Europe. And we kind of joked about the Arsenal thing. If Matt Turner goes to Arsenal and Taty goes to Arsenal, you kind of have that like Messi and Ramos little they had their bickering in that game. Can they gel at Arsenal?
Taty walking off the field at the Revs, and I'm not sure like how much of the broadcast showed it, but it was at the corner right in front of NYCFC's supporter section. Like, I'm trying to think of a word to use. Like, he was just purposely being like the biggest like brat that he could be to like, I don't know, just like put his mark on the game. Like, taking off, I think he took his shin pads off before he left the field. He kind of just threw them into the crowd, and then they were thrown back onto the field, and just kind of just standing around strolling strolling, purposely staying on just to kind of create a spectacle. And I think, things like that, because, Taty has the personality, I think, to be a star elsewhere on top of, the skill, which is those two things usually mesh well to, demand like high transfer fees. And I think both of you are right that if there's going to be a transfer, it has to be to Europe. And I think he, has the skill to back up a transfer to Europe. And it's amazing to start looking at, as talent leaves NYCFC, how much we're like spreading our talent to the rest of the world and even the rest of the league at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at the fact that this is City Football Group as part of the owners of this club, and if anybody can hold out for the money they want, that is a club that can really do that. That's a group that can really do that, and they're not going to sell Taty early. I mean, who knows? I mean, Pep even called him out this year, saying that he belongs in the Premier League. So who knows what they're thinking as far as that goes? I don't think they're in any rush to sell him. They're going to wait for the right offer, and he's going to be around for a little longer, which is great. We'll see him in a few games. NYCFC uniform this year, and that'll be great to see. If he scores like 5 or 6 goals in the first couple of months, the price is only going to go up too. So it's a win-win as far as it goes. He should hold out for the right offer because he's got the talent and the skills and the charisma. You're right. He's a personality. He's somebody that's going to be on the team and bring something to the team. So there's a lot of teams that need that right now.
Yeah, kind of off script, but it came to my head now. If Taty does leave, who do you see that's actively on the roster right now as, his replacement or somebody that we can use in his spot?
I think his replacement is I mean, there's no like for like on the roster right now because, I mean, it's hard to find someone who works as hard as him. I mean, he's just a workhorse on and off the ball. Like, that's why I love him so much. He's always going to give that extra percent. But I think we got, 2 really good options in Hébert, who's just now probably getting back to like real form after his injury. And we've also got, Talish Magno. I mean, he came on and was a big part of that playoff run, and he was really coming into form at the end of last year too. So I think there's 2 really good options in there. Talish is the one that really excites me. I love Hébert. I think he's a great guy and great striker. He's good, different type of player than Taty. But Talish has this sort of special spark that I think Ronnie can develop. If you look at how Taty developed with his team. I mean, Talish is in the same spot that Taty was, and I think his ceiling is actually higher than Taty's as far as like a skill and a skill set and where he can go. And Ronnie is a great guy to develop that. He's a guy known for developing players. So I'm really loving what I'm seeing from him, and I think we're going to see big things from him this year.
Yeah, I think Talish is a guy that can, come to the midfield, pick up the ball, push it forward, and create as much as he can be serviced. And so I do think that he adds just an element to that team that can be electric. And he literally could be the next guy that, comes in, scores a ton of goals, and gets a big transfer fee out.
Yeah. And you see, looking at the development of Taty, it's sort of a similar story. They came to the club kind of younger as wingers, and Taty was really forced into this 9 role just out of, a lack of anyone better that could fill it. Ronnie experimented with tossing Medina or Maxi in like a false 9. He tried every different way to turn Matrita into a striker, and then he kind of shipped him off to wherever he went off to, and then ultimately it came down to, if this team is going to perform and this team is going to score goals, we're just going to stick Taty at 9, and you guys have to feed him, and he's going to have to put them in the back of the net. And I think, one of the more interesting things that I heard on Blue City Radio was when you guys had Twellman on, he made a statement that, Taty should have scored over 30 goals this season. And like, I'm glad that is not something that just the NYCFC community thinks.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the expected goals this season, if you look at the chances created, he probably should have scored over 30 goals. And that's why, I'm saying like maybe this year, if we can get that service to him more often, and now with the confidence that he has, like maybe he does score 30 this year if he stays in MLS.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to stay in MLS, but he could legitimately have a couple of months at the beginning of the season where he scores a ton of goals really quickly, just because of the chances we create as a team. The core of the team is still there. Those chances are still going to be there. So I think, the sky's the limit as far as he goes.
Yeah.
Well, I think we were having conversations on our podcast early in the season about, does Taty need me to come over there and teach him how to put it in the back of the net? Because, he's getting the chances he's not he's not finishing them. And then he goes and wins a Golden Boot, and you kind of eat your words, and you're like, maybe he doesn't need me. I'll admit, maybe he doesn't need me.
Yeah.
He just needed to finish those chances, and he had a ton of them.
I don't have it offhand, but I think, one thing to even beyond the Golden Boot, how many goals did he score in the playoffs? And I always wish that in those MVP conversations that they would take the playoffs into consideration, because, that is, when it is the most important to be the most valuable for your team. And I understand that kind of takes a lot of people that don't qualify for the playoffs out of the conversation in a way. But, in every sport, even in football, I think the same thing. It's like, I think his goal total got up to at least 22, potentially 23 with all of the performances that he put on.
I think he scored in each of the first two.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at his assists created too, as far as like the year goes and the playoffs goes, he was actually, I think second in assists as far as like goal total and assists. He's a player who like creates like havoc.
I think he finished last in the voting.
It's so weird. Because when you think about it, for me, when you think about an MVP, I think about someone who their team really can't function very well without. When you take Carlos Gil out of New England, they still won. I think if you take Taty out of NYCFC, they drop off precipitously after that.
When the MVP the MVP was announced on Twitter, that was like our exact angle, and we threw it out there and applied the correct hashtag so we could potentially get some Revs fans engagement. And that was like our exact thing. I remember saying that almost verbatim to some Revs fan that like, without Gil, are you guys really that bad of a team? Like, I don't think so. Without Taty, we are nothing. Like, we genuinely can't score nothing. Yeah. So that, I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, that's something we got to change this year. We got to be able to score without Taty. We're going to have a hard thing when he leaves.
And I think that's something that the club tried to focus on, going into the super draft. My mindset was, that we should, probably be putting a lot of our valuable picks towards like a backup center back of some kind, because, once we shipped Ibiaga out, it was like we're an injury away from being dead in the water completely. And then you see the club go forward with all three picks that we actually make, which I think kind of blew my mind. And, thinking about it more, I think part of that was, I believe NYCFC2 is looking, pretty good, but is sort of like the first team in where a striker is a necessary position to, build some depth in. And that, that doubly works for us, because as the NYCFC2 gets going, we could potentially call people up if somebody's like banging in goals to the first team, where there's jobs, the 9 job or a striker job is something that is up for grabs this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our super draft was largely just about the MLS Next league. I think it was largely that we're filling out that roster, getting some forwards on there, and if there's somebody who can step it up and suddenly becomes like, oh, hey, he's a legitimate replacement for Taty in certain situations, maybe that's a great thing. But I think that was all about that second team that we're filling out there. I figured that out when we did the trade and we dropped down. We just got that, allocation money. That's something we're going to bring in other players. We have money to spend. So who knows who we're going to bring in, but we have money to spend on backup center backs and people that are actually going to really compete for time with the first team. So I think this is the drafts were all about that second team that we're filling out the roster for.
Do you have any worry that we haven't made any, splash transfers yet?
No, not really. I think they're being smart. I mean, if anything it taught me this year is to trust David Lee. I think he did an excellent job filling out the roster and getting guys at the right time, in the right minutes. And it costs less to transfer somebody in the summer. So I think that's a big thing. I think there's a lot of factors in fact as like signings go. This whole new COVID wave is like put the kibosh on a lot of like signings and a lot of movement from players. And I think that we're just making the smart signings and the ones that we run. And we're not going to sign somebody just for the sake of signing somebody. We have a good enough team to compete in this league, even at the place we are now. We got 2 DP slots and a lot of money to spend on other players. So I think we're going to get the right spot. And we have, again, City Football Group, they have the best scouting, one of the best scouting, structures in the world. So we're going to find those players that can come in and make an immediate impact. And I think it just takes time to do that. So That's the one thing that I came out of this year with is trust David Lee. I think he's really on the ball with what he's doing is creating this club. Yeah.
I mean, I'd agree, and I think that you know, we're in a position where we just won the MLS Cup. I think the front office obviously knows how insanely difficult it would be to go on and repeat anyways. So they're probably in a position where they don't want to make signings unless it's the exact perfect signing for them for the right price. Because at the end of the day, you know, it is insanely hard to go and repeat, and that's probably, you know, what they're looking at going forward in this next season.
And it just got harder for us to repeat too with Toronto's moves and with everybody's getting New England's like got legit as well. Like this, they're going to be better than they were last year, and Toronto's going to be significantly better than they were.
And I think, like you said, you know, our team is good enough that we're not forced into making transfers to really shore up any holes. But beyond that, you know, our academy is also good enough that, you know, if you're not severely lacking in a position that, you know, needs attention, you know, we have young guys like Tayvon Gray that can step up into roles that, you know, you couldn't imagine, I think, if you're Tayvon Gray, that you would have to step up into a role and start all 4 playoff games on an MLS Cup run at 19 years old. And you see us, you know, making some moves with homegrown contracts for, you know, Nico Benalcazar and JJ and Kwaku, bringing these guys along with us to preseason too, so they can start to get into Ronnie's system, which I think we've learned over the course of early 2021 and also the MLS is Back tournament, that there are definitely some growing pains as you get into the way that Ronnie wants to play. So I think it's good to start, you know, getting those guys kick-started in the preseason here, you know, as early as tomorrow. I guess we were meant to play Orlando, and for whatever reason, we've now flexed that to a Red Bulls game. So I guess we have a derby tomorrow. I can't believe that's already happening.
Playing that team in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah, it's I wish we could watch that game tomorrow. I wish there was a way to stream it because I'd love to see what this team is made up of. I mean, preseason games mean very little as far as like things go. It's just getting the club back on the same page. But I feel like we just ended our season. I guess that's the deal with playing in MLS Cup, is that I feel like we're still sort of like just 2 weeks away from that celebration. So I'm curious to see what happens when we don't have Sands, when we don't have those players, like, you know, how he fills in those people and who he's thinking about with these young kids that are coming up through the academy. Some of those guys, you're right, they're going to be the backups this year. We don't have a backup for Callens right now. So I'm hoping that we have a homegrown player that can step up and do that if they want, you know, because that to me is the biggest thing of losing Sands. You lose a guy who can back up 2 or 3 positions and play a starting 11 position, you know, as well. We missed that utility player, and we don't have that this year. And Callens, to me, that's the biggest need we need to fill. We need to find a backup for him because he's going to be gone some this year, and we don't have someone to step in that spot.
I think it's possible that Tayvon can fill that role with Tinnerholm coming back. I think it's possible. I don't think it's ideal, but I do think it's possible for him to kind of fill in that role. I believe he played center back when he was younger.
Mm-hmm. He definitely has a past.
He has a past in playing center back. Obviously not at this level, but I think it's something that can happen. Probably not desired, but it can happen. And also Alfredo, which I hate at center back, but is possible as well.
I'd never see Alfredo at center back again. I'll be happy. That's fine. I can do. He really came on at the end of the year and was a really big part of the playoff run, but he was not playing center back when he was doing that. So let's never do that again, as far as I'm concerned.
This is a little off, I think, what we plan to talk about, but do you have any thoughts on what I think should be a big battle between Tinnerholm and Tayvon for a starting position in this team?
I think when Tinnerholm comes back, and I think it's going to, I mean, having these knee injuries like are really hard to, like, you know, sorry, it wasn't a knee injury, but this injury that he suffered was a pretty bad injury. So it's going to take him a while to come back. So I think there is no competition right now, but when he does come back and gets in form, Tinnerholm's got to be your starting player. Tayvon is great. I think he's a really good backup and really good coming in. It may be a situation that we saw with Malta and Goody this year, where they starts different players at different games depending on the matchup. And it's a place where we can give Tinnerholm some rest, because he was the player that was working all the time last year, and that's probably maybe what led to the injury. Was it fatigue? So it's good that Tayvon can do this, and he played wonderfully in the playoffs. I was so impressed with him. And I wouldn't be surprised if we think about moving Anton. I love Anton, but Tayvon is someone who can step into that position. But I think if Anton's healthy, he's the one that you're starting. If he's the one that's in form and up to playoff shape, he's the one you're starting. Just because he's been that guy for us. He is that guy for us. And Tayvon is just getting there. He's still developing.
Yeah, I think maybe wrapping this up, the last thing to really talk about is what do you think expectations for the CONCACAF Champions League should be? Because I think us certainly, and you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, what we want at this point is another trophy. Do you think that especially with some of the key departures that we had, is something realistic for fans to be expecting of us?
I do, actually. I think it's it's hard because there's never been an MLS winner. And so we know chances are against us. And like Taylor Twellman said on our show this last week, we're playing against leagues that have no salary, like the salary cap for their teams, and that's that is inherently a hindrance for MLS. But I think we can do that, and I think that's something that's a legitimate goal that we can set our sights on to get through this. We have a favorable draw. We don't play any Liga MX teams until I think the semifinals, so we can get pretty far without having been really challenged. And we have the roster to do it. If you look at these guys that left, the guys that step in, James Sands, we've got Nicolas Acevedo can step in there and play that part. We've seen him get in there and do that. We're just beginning to see Zelalem come back into the fold too, so he can take in for Parks, and when Parks gets healthy, he can get back in there. We've got the structure in place, the systems in place, the teams in place. We have a really good team. I think it's legitimate. It's legitimate for us to expect and hope that we can win this Champions League. Now that being said, I don't know if we'll do it or not. I'm disappointed about the move to LA for the home game. That was really let me down. I understand logistically why they did it, but as a fan, I want to be there for those games. I want to see that. It takes away the home field advantage in my eyes, but hopefully that's just the first round kind of thing. We can get some games here in New York with the Champions League in the next round. So.
Yeah, and same question to you, Justin. What are your expectations for this Champions League?
I think, a New York fan, I would like us to go and win it. But, realistically, yeah, I mean, there's some great points there. There's never been an MLS winner. But I think, if we bring that same mentality that we had with the MLS Cup, with, why not us, like how we'll fight for each other, I think that anything is possible with that team. Anything's possible with a Taty that's confident in scoring. So I would like to see, as opposed to last season, what this team can do in this competition. I think they can go far. I think, everything is in front of them. They just have to go and play the way that they did throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, and I would just say I hope we don't lose Taty in like a shocking transfer before the cup is concluded, because he will be, obviously a very major part of that run. So, yeah.
Yeah, let's win it while we have him. I agree. Let's win it while we have him. That's why I'm hoping he stays this summer. We just stay, win that tournament, knock up his price a little more, and then, he'll move in the summer transfer window.
Cool. Well, I think we covered most of everything that we had in mind for this. I'd definitely like to thank you for joining us. This is the third time you've been on. You've definitely shown us love from the start, and we appreciate that among some other people in the NYCFC community. And to everybody listening, if you somehow know us and don't know Michael Allen, then we were going to throw up, his Twitter handle. Blue City Radio is a great listen to check out. Like we mentioned, some crazy guests with Joe Tollison, Taylor Twellman they just had on this past week, which was a great listen. He got a little bit into the U.S. men's national team side of things for a little while, if you're into that sort of thing. So check all that out.
The boys in blue getting some coverage, getting some clout.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It's been a pleasure, and it is great. I'm glad you guys are doing the podcast, getting this out there. To me, the more coverage we can get of this team, especially in the fact of the New York market that we just won the first major sports trophy in 10 years for any sport, any team, and we didn't get a parade, and we haven't gotten the accolades that we should be getting. Let's get this news out here, and let's spread the word about this team, because there's something special here, I think.
Cool. Well, thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
See ya.
We'll see you guys.
Bye.
You guys, yeah, perfect. See you.
Thanks. He's
I've
almost
messed up everything.
Yeah, he's never once gotten through an outro in a coherent way.
Not one time.